Yes, this was the main topic of discussion during this conference, and I heard many very interesting points of view, and it seems that there is a general consensus that there are three main factors behind the drop in oil prices. One factor was the shale revolution in the United States and surge in oil production in the United States. The second factor was the decision of OPEC to keep production levels, and the third factor was the relatively weak, slow growth of demand for refined products across the globe. Having said this, one has to ask the questions. What were the other factors which contributed to the growth of shale production in the United States, and what was the motivation of OPEC to maintain the current production levels? And I have no information to interpret the decisions made by the OPEC and the main oil producers, but it seems to me that this was a rational economic decision given growing production volumes in the United States, relative oversupply of the oil markets, and the need to protect the market share. If Saudi Arabia decided to cut its oil output, it would lose the market share and it wouldn't get the benefits of stronger prices. When it comes to the United States, there are many factors behind the production surge. I think that one factor that cannot be underestimated is flexibility of the American oil and natural gas industries. It's the presence of many relatively small or medium-sized companies which are very creative, very agile, and very good in advancing and implementing the most advanced technologies in oil and natural gas production. Also, there is another very important factor, and this is the low level of interest rates, which allows the industry to obtain funding on relatively good terms, not only to drill new wells, but also to expand the infrastructure which is needed to support the growing production trends. And this is one aspect of the problem which is not mentioned frequently, but this is extremely important. Production of oil and natural gas is growing in the regions which didn't have all the infrastructure supporting volumetric flows. Pipelines, gathering systems, rail terminals, pipeline terminals, and it's a rapid expansion of different infrastructure projects was really critical in supporting growing production volumes. What are the challenges? The challenges are that in the environment of falling prices or prices at depressed levels, the producers have to react by reducing costs and adjusting to the low price environment. And I think that we see a lot of evidence that this is taking place along the entire supply chain. The producers and also the service companies, the companies providing different services related to oil and gas production are adjusting to lower prices, reducing costs, in some cases making very painful decisions to reduce employment and reduce the prices they charge for their services. It's very difficult. I can see this in my home state of Texas. It will have impact on the levels of economic activity in oil and gas dependent states, But we went in the past through similar periods, and we came up on top. Well, at this workshop, I was talking about two major problems. One problem was the interactions between natural gas and oil industries in the shale revolution, and how the developments in the natural gas industry affected oil industry. So the shale revolution started in the natural gas production, and very quickly resulted in growing production and much lower prices. One of the adjustments the industry went through was to increase reliance on natural gas liquids. When natural gas is produced at the wellhead, it contains, in addition to methane, a number of heavier hydrocarbons, certain amounts of heavier hydrocarbons like ethane, propane, butane, and natural gasoline, which have to be removed from the natural gas stream and sold as separate products. In the past, the market for natural gas liquids wasn't very interesting. It was a relative backwater of the energy industry. At some point, given falling natural gas prices, the natural gas producers started shifting rigs from the dry gas locations, from the locations where natural gas at the wellhead has relatively small amounts of heavier hydrocarbons, natural gas liquids, to the wet gas locations. And it increased the subsidy provided by natural gas liquids, supporting production of natural gas, and also it contributed to the increase in total oil supply. Natural gas liquids in the United States are included in the total oil supply. And also over time, the exploration and production industry in the United States learned how to apply technologies developed for natural gas production for tight sand formations containing significant deposits of oil. And I think that over time, over the last few years, the scientists and engineers worked out the kinks in new technologies and very successfully applied technologies developed initially in production of natural gas to production of oil. And this led to the spectacular surge of oil production in the United States. Another factor I mentioned in my presentation at the conference was that there is another very important factor underlying growth of hydrocarbon production in the United States, and this is low interest rates environment. The question remains, what will happen when interest rates go up? Because it may create a much more difficult environment for the producers who were in the past cash flow negative and were relying on the capital flows from outside the industry to support their investment projects, capital expenditures. When interest rates go up, the rate at which capital flows to the industry may be reduced. And at this point we are unable to assess what will be the potential impact of higher interest rates and what would be the timing. I don't think that even the Federal Reserve in the United States cannot answer this question.